Hey everybody, this is Craig Baldwin with Upsourced. Welcome back to another episode of Creative Outcomes. Recently, I was asked to provide an episode on some sales issues that current clients are facing, what we've heard in the industry, and frankly, all things top line or all things revenue represent 30-40% of the conversations that I know that we have with our clients, all 130 plus of them in the agency space. And of course, many different businesses across the broader spectrum in the economy today. And so I just wanted to bring the conversation back down to um, ground zero, if you will, and start with some foundational elements that I hope provide you some clarity, some certainty, and an actionable plan for 2026, whether you are looking to grow an outrageous amount, whether you had a great year last year and you just like to continue incrementally, or perhaps you're coming off of a challenging year in 2025 and you're dying to improve and just don't know how. Believe me, you're not alone. I imagine many of your peers feel the exact same way. So let's start with something that I think is very critical that not all agencies do, but we do see it becoming much more common. And in fact, given the time of year, we're a little bit into January by now, but it's still an okay time to do your annual planning as it relates to the business and top line sales. That is typically done through some sort of annual budget conversation or forecast conversation. I like to distinguish between those two things as a budget is static and a forecast is dynamic, but we can get into those differences just a little bit later. Let me just say that no matter what you're creating, when we set out those goals, and typically they're in a spreadsheet or something similar, maybe they're on a scratch pad. I used to love to write goals on my flights across the country and think much more holistically and strategically about the business. And so I would put a goal out there that's a number, and I would work in reverse and try to figure out what's the plan that we need to put in place to get there. Um, this process really isn't that much different. But the one thing that I want to emphasize is it's still hyper important because I imagine for most of you, the revenue that you will achieve in 2026 will come from current relationships that you already have, current clients, those businesses where you're already receiving revenue before we initiated 2026. And so that's why the idea of annual account planning is so important. It's really, to simplify it, is this conversation around how do we retain revenue, how do we grow revenue, and to the extent that we think a relationship is going to go away or perhaps it will diminish, should we dismiss that revenue in our planning or our forecasting? And I just want to emphasize something that I think is often overlooked. And frankly, I'm a very small-minded in the intellectual way, I'll say, not small-minded in other ways, but I just don't have the horsepower to think of really complex topics. And so I like to boil things down to their most basic elements. When we do this exercise, the thing that I'm always thinking about is what is the best use of my time in 2026? Because my time is the most valuable asset that I have. And subsequently, the same is true for my partners, for my leadership team, for my sales and marketing staff. I want to know through all of this research and introspection and looking at prior years that I've done everything I can to put my team on a path to use their time as efficiently as possible, such that it produces the best outcome for the business. And of course, if we find along the way that things aren't working the way we thought, we can course correct at any given point in time. That will always be our prerogative. However, just going through this exercise to assign time or bets or investments that we're going to make is so critical. And I cannot emphasize that enough. And so that's really what the annual account planning exercise does for you and your agency. Frankly, I probably won't cover too much more of it other than that, because we do have a fantastic piece that yours truly did last year on annual account planning. And it's a step-by-step process of what that looks like and how to go about it within your organization and with your sales and marketing team, or really probably it's going to be with your account team. And there's even a video at the end if you want to see my lovely face as well. We talk about some of these topics, but I tear it down in a very fundamental way that I think is very easy to follow. And so if you're not doing that as a part of your 2026 sales planning, let's start there, and then we'll cascade into the other moments. All right. I want to give you one watch out as you go through that process yourself, with your partners, with your leadership team, with your sales and marketing team, your account team, however robust you may be. Don't be overly optimistic, and ensure that you know your clients as well as you say you are in that meeting that you have with your internal team. Be sure that you're being honest with yourself about what you know about their budgets and their timelines and the overall health of the relationship. I say this because I spend a lot of my personal time studying how the human mind works and how we behave when we are in front of other humans, especially in groups of humans. And when we get into a room with other team members, other salespeople, other leaders, we want to impress them. We want to make ourselves look good. We want to overestimate our capabilities. And that's not because we're bad people. That's just because those are the natural tendencies of any human who is looking to impress. And I have found over the years so much bad behavior in those meetings because people refuse to be honest with themselves as to the health of the relationship they have with their clients, their ability to obtain upside in a relationship, their own capabilities, just generally speaking. How well do they know the thing that they're selling, and their ability to convey that to the client? And so not that I want to be a Debbie Downer in those situations, but as a leader or as an owner, I would test those individuals. I would pressure them. I would challenge them to make sure that what they're saying is as close to the truth as possible. Because if it is not, that's where bad things happen, or when bad things happen, I should say. And it's in those moments when we rely on things which subsequently we cannot count on or do not occur, that we are left in a situation where we are responding and we don't have a lot of time or energy or resources to change the outcome. You've probably heard me say this before, but especially in agencies, and I think this is true of many businesses, but when you talk about sales or even account related, anything revenue related, outcome lags effort by about 3 months, i.e. a quarter, right? And so I need to be able to provide myself as much time as possible to hit the goals that I have in front of me. As we move along the course of the year, I get less and less time to solve the year's problems. And if I get punched in the face at any point in time and lose a key client, or spend a bunch of time on a group of RFPs and don't win any of them, it's hard to make up for that lost time. And now I'm searching for answers in a compressed time period. And I'll be honest with you, it's much more unlikely that I'll be successful in those moments than the moments where I'm presenting a steady amount of work over an extended period of time, and some things work and some things don't. And on average, I get an expected result, right? So I know this might sound simplistic. I know that all of us get very excited. Everyone's optimistic for the most part when you're planning work that has not yet been done. I do the same thing. But to the best of your ability, be realistic and truthful to yourself and to your team when you're doing that plan. All right. So we've talked about 2026 planning. A big chunk of that is quote unquote account planning, as I would call it, or current relationships that will make up that revenue. What about new sales, new relationships, new logos, as some might call them? What are the bets that we're going to make, and what do we hope to do? I would go through the same process, to be honest with you. You might have different people in the room. You might have an actual new logo seller or just a salesperson in general. You may have some members of your marketing team or Perhaps it's just members of your creative staff who help you on pitches when you do pitches. It could be any of those things, right? But ultimately, someone or some group of people need to be responsible for new sales, just like conceivably an account team is in charge of current relationships. And so you're going to go through a similar exercise where you're going to say, hey, as a part of our overall revenue goals in 2026, this is the portion that we would like new sales to play a role in. How are we going to get there? Now, that how is the thing that tends to trip up most people, because especially new sales is it's like many of the bigger questions in life where we wish someone would just tell us the answer because it's not clear cut. It's gray. In many cases, it is, well, the final result certainly is deterministic. Our efforts and the things we do, the things we try, the places we go, we never really know which one of them is going to work. We might have an inkling due to intuition or past experience, and all those things are very helpful, but we never really know until the deal is in the pipeline. We never really know until that deal has a proposal and then subsequently is signed. And so that's what makes new business so challenging for agencies. What I will say to you is, well, I will never profess to know what that answer may be for your business. What I can tell you is there are some things that I would avoid or just think critically about before I embark on new business sales. First of all, are you aligned on what you do, who you do it for, and why you're special? This is probably the thing that brings about the end to most really great agencies or agency owners that I know, or limits their ability to grow. It's not because they don't know what they do necessarily, and they don't know who they do it for necessarily. But when you really ask them, pressure them, test them, challenge them, what makes you so great at it, they have a hard time, because we all just think that we're great at what we do, and we think about ourselves from the inside out, but we rarely think about ourselves from the outside in. And when you're doing sales and marketing, as we all know as marketing professionals, we have to think about who we are from the outside in. That's what's most critical. And so if we don't have clear answers to those questions, it makes new business or new sales incredibly challenging, whether I'm doing them as the founder, or especially if I have a sales hire or team member who's tasked with growing sales. And so again, we just have to be very honest with ourselves about what that looks like for our organization. If you know what those things are, and you are in lockstep with your organization, and you have a previous track record to show that what you say you are is what you are, then new logo sales should not be that challenging per se. What we're really talking about is just the level of effort that's required. Of course, we may try different things. We may go to different conferences. We may call different people. We may advertise in certain areas. And these are all bets. I often think about this as a portfolio, and that portfolio on average needs to get a certain return. But how that return occurs could be from any one of my investments, like we just talked about. And so when you take that approach, it actually makes it much easier to contemplate how you might get to where you need to go. One of the watch outs I want to add here, though, is if your total 2026 number is made up of more than 20% from new sales, I would say that's a pretty strong warning sign that it may be very challenging for you to reach that number. There are exceptions, unless you have a history of outperformance. With new sales, this is most common with high throughput agencies. So many projects, or many recurring projects, and you perhaps have an established sales team, and you're out and you're selling many new deals all the time, and you don't really grow, quote unquote, current accounts that much. Now, odds are, if you are that type of agency, you probably answered a lot of those key questions already, but that is an exception for the 20% rule. Or if you invest over 10% of your top line revenue in sales and marketing, then I would expect outperformance. And we'll get into the 10% here in a little bit and why that matters. Um, for those of you who are struggling with the concept of what you do and who you do it for and why you're special, there's a fantastic article and I guess podcast really from David Baker and Blair Enns called The Waterfall of Differentiation. And I think breaks down this topic in a very simple way. And of course, those are two individuals who have a lot of experience in this space. And so I would encourage you to go look at that and check that out if you haven't already. I have shared it with a number of clients who are struggling to answer those questions for themselves. The episode's not very long and there's additional information here, but just want to give a nod to that particular piece as a way to really think about your brand strategy, which is so imperative to how you're able to perform thereafter within the marketplace. So I'll stop there as it relates to account planning and new business sales. Now let's talk about who manages all of this, because some founders love managing it. Some want nothing to do with it. And I understand that. Now, I'm the type of founder that I love being hands-on. I love managing sales. I love the thrill of the chase. I still even send cold emails myself from time to time. Like, I am a grinder. It's what makes me who I am. And so that is unique to me, but many agency founders are not that way. And if you are that way, more power to you. But if you're not, you know, it's simple, I think, which is account team members to the best of your ability, depending on your scale, should be managing current revenue and current revenue growth. Okay. Marketing and sales manage the front door. That is to say, new logos or new sales. And you may have one team member who is a chief revenue officer or head of revenue, or is really just managing the dynamic between marketing and sales and bearing responsibility for that number. Whatever that looks like, depending on your scale, that's great. Now, I will say to you, in my opinion, the founder or leadership team needs to be the face of the business and of that new biz effort constantly. We can say it all times. We'll go with that, especially during the first 10 million in revenue. Do not expect to offload your BD challenges to someone else if you cannot do it yourself. And I think there is a very critical point that is often overlooked, which is to say, if you cannot solve this most fundamental issue, which is how do I continue to attract clients and grow my business over time? Whew, boy, oh boy, how do you expect somebody else to solve it for you, right? So I challenge a lot of founders in the past who look at new business or just revenue in general as kind of a check the box activity, as if it were to deliver creative work or write some copy or run some media. By the way, I don't think any of those professionals would like their work to be seen as a check the box activity. The same is especially true of all things related to revenue. It is not a problem that can easily be solved without a lot of experience and a lot of effort. And so solving that for your organization must be done from the founder or the leadership team. If that team cannot do it, I think you'll be very hard pressed to experience success as long as you're subscale. If you are at scale, if you're 10 million and plus and you have well established functional areas within your business who are bearing responsibility and led by senior people, then that may not be the case anymore, right? But I venture to guess that even in those types of agencies, the president or the CEO or the leader of the business is still very involved in the BD motion. You see this true of the largest companies in the world, even to this day. The other watch out, or the other thing I want to add here, and actually I apologize, this is redundant, so I'm going to remove that. It is a watch out though, is pipeline hygiene is paramount at all times and in all situations. Too many lies are told in the pipeline. I'm mixing some metaphors here, but an ounce of caution is worth a pound of regret. Okay. Just like when we're in that annual planning meeting, people do some really weird things in pipeline, salespeople specifically. There are many overly optimistic salespeople There are many salespeople who are trying to protect their jobs, trying to overrepresent. And it is challenging for many founders to distinguish if a salesperson is good at what they do or not, especially in a short period of time. Now, over the course of 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, you'll have a sense of how good are they at what they've professed to be good at, right? But in a short time frame, it can be really challenging. And so keeping accurate and timely record of all the relationships that are coming in and all the deals that are in flight and the status of those deals, whether they're from current or not yet clients, cannot be more important to add stability to your business, to your mental state. And again, if we're doing that properly, it allows me to properly assign my own time or my team's time to that pipeline and everything that revolves around it. If I can't do that, and if I have wasted effort, then it's harder and harder for me to make up that time when it comes to showing the result I need to show for that year-end goal. I want to bring back up the topic I mentioned earlier, which is use 10% as a ceiling on sales and marketing spend. You can spend more, okay? But what I will tell you is if you want to maintain a profit level like 20%, and when I say profit, I mean net operating income or operating income, 20%, 25%, even 30%, it becomes more and more challenging to do that if you are spending over 10% of the revenue that you bring in on sales and marketing. Now, I think it's perfectly acceptable to say business is going really well. I'm going to accept a lower net operating income in return for investing more now into the future of my business and continuing to grow. I think that's totally fine. And when a lot of people ask me, well, what is the right measure of operating income in comparison to year-over-year growth? I just kind of chicken out and say I like the rule of 40 that the technology world uses, which is take your year-over-year growth and add to it your net operating income. And if those two things combined are 40 and above, and I'm speaking in percentages, then you got a good thing going. So a perfect example of that would be 20% net operating income and 20% year-over-year growth would get you that 40, right? So if you're doing that, I think you're kicking butt. If you're close to that, you're still probably doing pretty well. But if you're falling under that and you're spending over 10% on sales and marketing, that tab's going to come due at some point, and you may have wished you could have reined that spending in and kept those dollars either in the business or in the leadership or founder's pocket. So just as a standard practice, we like 10% as a ceiling for sales and marketing. There are exceptions, just like everything else. We've talked about a few of those, but keep that in mind as you're building out that 2026 plan. All right, let's talk about the next topic that every founder loves to talk about, because it's so easy to draw up a plan that says, I'm going to hire a salesperson for $100,000. They're going to get $1 million worth of revenue. And who wouldn't take that deal, right? I'd take that deal. Well, it's not that clean cut in most cases. I wish it was. But the simple answer I give to many agency owners who want to hire a salesperson, and this is after I've already tried to talk them out of hiring a salesperson in most cases, is I don't know, what can you afford, right? Most people want the salesperson, but they don't want to pay for it. Sales leaders at today's small agencies are getting 150 to 250K a year, sometimes even more. And that includes variable compensation. They're not cheap, and rightfully so, because sales is such a hard nut to crack for most organizations. So you have to ask yourself, can your financials handle that? When you think about that sales and marketing ceiling, can you handle that? Are you willing to invest that or assign those dollars to someone and make a bet and you don't actually know what the return is going to be until maybe it's too late? Can your ego handle that? So for some organizations, especially those sub $10 million a year, that might be more than you're making as the founder or as the owner or principal of the business. You need to make sure that your ego can handle that. Are you willing to be patient? This is another thing that I talk quite a bit, and this is as someone who is hired sales leaders and has been a sales leader for other businesses, is it takes time. Everyone has a slightly different sales cycle, but if we go back to that phrase I had earlier, which is outcome lags effort by 3 months. If I have no pipeline today, it may take me 3 months just to get a deal or two or three into the pipeline. and then perhaps another month or two just to close one of those deals. So that takes a full 5 to 6 month cycle just to determine if that salesperson is worthwhile. Are you willing to wait 6 months to determine if this person is on the right trajectory for your business? Now, of course, sometimes there are early indicators, there are behavioral indicators, there are things which would be warning signs to you as an owner where maybe you would pull the ripcord and fire that person sooner rather than later. But in many cases, I tell founders that they may be able to wait 6 to 12 months before they make their call on the effectiveness of a salesperson and if that hire was worth it. And if they're not willing to wait that long, shouldn't make the hire yet, in my opinion. All right, last thing, what to expect in 2026. And this is because there's constantly a noisy conversation around what's the environment like. And I will be the first to tell you, just like I told my own team, the environment, the macro and even micro environment is out of our control. And by the way, we've never been able to control it. And I never will be able to control it. It's there. Sometimes it's wind in my sails, and sometimes it's holding me back. But I can't spend too much of my time and energy on the environment. I just know that if things are tough, quote unquote, I need to work harder. If things are easier, I'm still probably going to work harder, but maybe I don't have to work as hard to get the result I need, right? I have this opinion that 2014 to 2023 lulled us all into thinking anyone can do it. This is not just an agency thing. I think this is true of many of us, especially those who worked in technology, those who worked in startups. I think that's very common from what you've seen in the last 5 years, how many people have started a startup or a venture-backed organization. How many people have started an investment fund? We're at the tail end, and really, frankly, probably are already at the tail and starting a new cycle, but we're at the tail end of that cycle. We're beginning a new cycle, in my opinion. So I think that this is a situation where the firms who thought things were easy then, if you still have that mindset, you are regressing. There's no doubt about it. Now, you may continue to grow somewhat, but I would encourage you to think introspectively, very significantly about what you need to be for the next 10 years or even next 5 years, because I do believe we're starting a new cycle. The old ways are less useful and new ways are emerging, whether that's AI, which is taking up all the oxygen in the room, and probably rightfully so. Media and how media continues to change and in some ways stays the same. And I get that, especially from the creative folks. And talent, the types of talent, the way we can run our business from anywhere in the world, how closer to, in some cases, our client's customer, the young people in our agencies are. I mean, these are just generational changes, which I believe are taking hold just now in the agency landscape. And if you're not prepared for that, and if you don't have your battle armor on to compete in this new environment, I think, and especially this is probably why we've seen so many exits or consolidation or so much M&A activity even in the last year. And by the way, this is devoid of anything related to the political landscape or whatever you want to equate to that, which is I would totally understand. I would totally be empathetic to, but again, I can't change those things. And so I would ask some tough questions about my business over the next 10 years in this new cycle that we're in. And by the way, I am. I don't have an agency, but I do have a professional service firm that is entering a new climate. And I'm thinking quite critically about who we are over those moments or what we can or will not be over the next 10 years. So, all that to say, it's more challenging. It doesn't mean you can't be successful, though. In fact, I think it brings about new opportunity for many of those who are seeing the future clearly and willing to commit themselves and put forth the requisite amount of effort. The one thing that let me take that back. There are many things which continue to be true. I'm a big believer that there are many underlying principles which will always be the case. They might just look and feel a little bit different. But the foundational truth remains that the relationship that you have with the buyer of your services, whether that's at a really massive company or a really small company underpins your success. And this is not just like a, hey, salesy relationship thing. I mean, ultimately, especially when we're providing professional services, I always used to tell salespeople who work for me, and granted, we sold pretty large 7-figure plus contracts, but I would say everybody who's buying services from us and spending this amount of money, they are betting their job on us. Now, not everybody who's spending that money is, but the one person who probably says, I want to use this firm. Will you put up the money? Or maybe they are signing for it. Maybe it is from their budget. More likely than not, they are betting their job on the services that you provide. That may not realistically always be the case, especially if you're providing kind of a smaller dollar service. But if you're able to maintain that trust through the relationship that you have with your buyer, and circumstances allow for the continuance of that relationship, that underpins one of the biggest challenges we all have in business and professional services, anything B2B, and all other problems are solvable, in my opinion. It's just making sure that you can continue to earn the trust of current clients and subsequently earn the trust of net new clients and maintain it. If we can do those things, we continue to run an agency who performs over time. So with that, think about this through the lens of your agency in 2026. Check out the links, annual account planning that we produce, as well as the waterfall of differentiation from the guys at Two Bobs. Both of those are fantastic materials. And ask some hard questions of yourself, of your leadership team. I know a lot of you follow the EOS program and go through the planning and rocks process. This is a great time to do that. So with that, I wish everyone great luck, especially in this first quarter in 2026. If you ever want to talk revenue, which I know is not the normal accounting thing, but if you ever want to talk revenue, you're more than welcome to reach out to me directly at cbaldwin@upsourcedaccounting.com. Otherwise, I hope everyone has a great day and a great first quarter. Thanks, everybody.